Hello guys and welcome back to Planet 40k Tyranids. Today we're going to be doing a bite-sized review of the Tyranid warriors from the Tyranids Codex, of course. Now if you were to purchase these from Games Workshop, it's £37.50, €50 or $60 in the US, and you'll be getting 3 models within this box. Now optionally you could use 2 of them as your Tyranid warriors and 1 could be your Tyranid Prime. But today we are just talking about the Tyranid warriors. In fact, they are also available in the new boarding patrol box for the Tyranids. You're in fact going to be getting 6 of those models in that very box set. Right, so let's begin this video with the datasheet. They are a troop selection, of course, so they're going to have objectives secured naturally. You can get units between 3 and 9 of these. They're coming in at 30 points ahead. Now the movement is 6 inches, the weapon skill and ballistic skill is a 3+, strength and toughness is 5, wounds and attacks 3, leadership 9 and a 4+ armor save. So that toughness 5 is pretty good in terms of their resiliency, however their armor save does let them down slightly with only a 4+. As for the keywords of note, again infantry, they've got the synapse keyword, so that's going to relate to the synapse ability. We'll get onto that later in the video, and they're also a core unit, so character buffs are going to be working quite nicely. As for the weapons, there's a lot of weaponry here, so you're going to have to bear with me. We're going to make our way through all of these. There's a lot of upgrades, a lot of options, so here we go. So to begin with, every model is equipped with the Devourer, the Bone Swords, as well as the Lash Whip. Now even though it said it's 30 points a model, you will have to pay 5 points for that Bone Sword if you are taking that default loadout. However, the Devourer and the Lash Whip is free. So let's begin with the Devourer. In fact, it's an 18-inch range Assault 5 weapon, it's Strength 5, no AP, 1 damage. Now you've got a ballistic skill value of a 3+, so you should be using this against light infantry only. Toughness 3, potentially toughness 4 at best. You shouldn't really go any further than that unless you have to. There's no AP here, so you're not going to expect to do too much against their armor. And being only 1 damage a pop, again, that goes hand in hand against light infantry. As for the Bone Swords, they're 5 points for the Bone Sword, of course. Their strength +2. Now their starting strength is 5, so that makes these Bone Swords strength 7. They're -2 AP and 2 damage, so you're getting 3 attacks as standard for your Tyranid warriors, hitting on a 3+ with weapon skill 3. This is mainly going to be served against elite infantry, potentially light vehicles. Unless you're buffing these with some buffs that we're going to talk about later in this video, you can then upgrade this to heavier vehicles, and you're then getting the Lash Whip on top of that, which allows the bearer to reroll all hit rolls of a 1. Again, we'll talk about that more with the Wargear options. So that's the default loadout. Let's now talk about the first part of the Wargear options, which is any number of models can have their Bone Sword and Lash Whip replaced with one of the following. So the first option is the dual Bone Swords. This is going to cost you 10 points. You're losing the Lash Whip, so you're not re-rolling 1s anymore, but to compensate for the lack of re-rolls, you're going to get 1 additional attack. Now I personally don't think this is that great for 10 points for 1 additional attack, and you're losing the re-rolls as well. For me personally, that one is a no-go. I wouldn't be taking that one. The second option here is the 2 Rending Claws. Now these are strength +1, so that makes them strength 6, -4 AP, 1 damage. So you're definitely going to go through armor without the invuln saves, and you're going to be wounding them on a 3+. Now it's only 1 damage, but you're at least going through the armor. That's the main reason for these. Now there's no additional attacks here, there's no re-rolls, because you will have replaced your Lash Whip, but it isn't the worst option, especially when you combine it. And we'll go over some of the combinations in a moment. Now the third option here is the 2 Scything Talons. This is only strength user, so only strength 5. There's no re-rolls again, but you're going to be getting 1 additional attack for each of your Scything Talons. So you're going to have 2 Scything Talons if you're replacing your Bone Sword and Lash Whip. That makes you have 5 attacks in total. Again, no re-rolls here because you've lost the Lash Whip. This is strength 5, -1 AP, 1 damage. Now against light infantry, again, that's probably where you want to go with this, because -1 AP against say 5+, 6+ armor saves is where you want to be. You don't want to be using Scything Talons against, say for example, power armor, because your opponent is going to be saving half of the wound rolls. So that's the first bullet point if you are replacing the Bone Sword and Lash Whip. We will come back onto the melee side of things in a moment, but for now we're going to go into the range attacks. You could actually replace your Devourer with one of the following. So you've got 1 Death Spitter. Let's go through that first. So it is 5 points. It's got 24-inch range, so 6 inches better off in terms of range over the Devourer. Assault 3, so you are losing 2 shots there against a Devourer, but this time it is strength 5, -2 AP and 1 damage, as opposed to strength 4, no AP, 1 damage. So yeah, less shots, more range, better strength, better AP, still only 1 damage. Maybe I'd take it if I've got my Tyranid warriors staying back on my own deployment zone perhaps, just to give them a little bit more range in the backfield. The second option here is for the Spine Fists. Now these are only 12-inch range, they're pistol 2, strength 5, -1 AP and 1 damage. Now what's good about these is you can fire them into engagement range because they are pistols. Again, it's only good against light infantry, it's only -1 AP, 1 damage, you're going to be wounding on a 3+, but you can almost see this as having additional attacks if you're still in an ongoing fight. Now sticking with bullet point 2, you can also swap out the Devourer with some of the melee weapons that we've already spoken about, but now you can start creating customizations with melee only models. So for example, you could have 2 lots of dual bone swords, that's going to be 5 attacks in total, because you've got 3 as standard and then 1 for each of the dual bone swords. Maybe you want to have 1 set of dual bone swords and then 1 other bone sword with a lash, so you've got just 4 attacks but you're re-rolling 1s. Maybe you want 4 scything talons because that will be 7 attacks in total, because every single scything talon gives you 1 additional attack. Basically you can mix and match the melee weapons as you see fit. There's benefits to all different combinations here, but it's quite a nice advantage to the Tyranid warriors. Now getting on to the third bullet point, for every 3 models in the unit, 1 model's Devourer can be replaced with the Barb Strangler. This is a 10-point range weapon, it's 36-inch range, assault D6, so unreliable I suppose, but at least you could potentially get a high number there. Strength 6, -1 AP, 1 damage with the blast ability. So definitely good against larger units, maybe toughness 3 so that you are wounding them on a 2+. The -1 AP is all you need against those units, 1 damage. And also note it's an assault weapon, so you could potentially advance with this and still fire at a -1 to hit. Now for me, I think 10 points is a little bit too pricey for that one, but the Venom Cannon, which is the next option, is only 5 points. 36-inch range again, assault D3, so only D3 shots there, but an average of 2 I suppose. Strength 8, -3 AP, damage is 2 with the blast ability. Again, it's got good range, this time it's more anti-elite infantry, perfect Space Marine killers, wounding them on a 2+, -3 AP puts them on a 6+ armor, 2 damage removes standard intercessor models, and blast of course is going to assist with the bigger units. That one is definitely one I would take for just 5 points. So that's all the weapon upgrades. We've still got some other Wargear options which we're going to go over now. The first one is the Adrenal Glands. For 15 points for the entire unit, you're going to add 1 to the movement characteristics and also add 1 to the strength characteristics. Now this means that your bone swords can in fact go to strength 8, which of course again going up against toughness 4 Space Marines as an example, you're wounding them on a 2+ with that 2 damage weapons with the bone swords is pretty good. Or you can get the scything talons to strength 6, which is very effective against toughness 3 models. There's also a stratagem available, which is the Adrenal Surge stratagem for 1 extra attack per model. That's for Adrenal Glands models only. Now that one is situational. If you've got the spare points, maybe you want to take it, but for a 3-man unit it's probably not worth it at 5 points a pop. If you're looking at a 5, 6, even a 9-man unit, then yeah, 15 points for the entire unit is a bargain. The next one on the list is the Flesh Hooks. It's 5 points for the entire unit. The bearers gain the Flesh Hooks keyword. When they make a normal move, advanced move, or fallback moves, they do not count vertical distance during the movement. So it's good for scaling terrain, because normally if you're going up a ruin for example, you need to use up your movement to get to the next floors within that ruin, whereas with the Flesh Hooks you're literally just jumping up for free. It's also going to work with one of the stratagems called Impaling Hooks, to allow your unit to hit on 2s in melee. That's probably the real reason you're taking it, but you still need to spend a command point in order to use that stratagem. 5 points for the entire unit, situational. If you've got the spare points, then perhaps. The lash whips we've kind of already spoken about in this video today, allowing you to reroll your hit rolls over 1. Again, with your melee weapon combos, this could be key. There is a unique stratagem available to this one also, which is the Psychotropic Venom. It's a -2 to enemy leadership in engagement range and their combat attrition test. Now I don't think that one's the biggest deal of all things, but another situational option there. Then finally we've got the Toxin Sacks. This is 10 points for the entire unit. Again, the larger the unit, the more valuable this will be. So what this does is in melee, any unmodified hit rolls of a 6 automatically wound the target. So if you've got 9 of these with say 3 attacks each or even 5 attacks each, depending on your weapon loadout, there's going to be potentially quite a lot of 6s that automatically wound. And of course there is a stratagem available to the Toxin Sacks. Now it's a Gorgon Hive Fleet specific stratagem, which is a hyper toxicity. Instead of 6s automatically wounding the target, it will in fact be 5s. So 1/3 of your dice will automatically wound. Again, if you've got a 9-man unit of these with loads of attacks, that's fantastic. Right, so that's all the Wargear dealt with. Let's move on to the abilities. There's not many here. Synapse, of course, is the first ability. So Hive Fleet units within 6 inches automatically pass their morale test. If you've got these in your backlines, you don't have to keep other Synapse units there. Also, for other models that are in your backline, we'll get those morale tests automatically passed. Also, they've got Shadow in the Warp, which is another aura. Enemy Psychos within 18 are subtracting 1 from Psychic tests, and an extra mortal wound if they perils in the Warp. They've then got the Warrior Spawning ability. If you're including Tyranid Warriors, then you can include 1 Tyranid Prime in your detachment without taking up a battlefield role slot. Yeah, that sometimes comes in handy, but to be honest, not that often. There's much better HQs within the Tyranid Codex than a Tyranid Prime. Now we've also got to mention their Synaptic Imperative ability because they're a Synapse unit and they have got Goaded to Slaughter. So while this Synaptic Imperative ability is active for your army for that battle round, friendly Hive tendril units within 6 inches of your Synapse models, when making an unmodified hit roll of a 6 in melee, they score an additional hit. So exploding 6s for any units that are within 6 inches of your Synapse models army wide for a single battle round. That one's pretty good, especially if you've got a melee based faction. And then finally we got to mention the Synaptic Link range, of course, because they're a Synapse unit, so your Synaptic Link range will be increased. It will be chained across to other Synapse units to pass on abilities. Now let's move on to the Hive Fleets next for your Tyranid warriors. I mean, they're going to work with all the Hive Fleets, to be honest with you. They can be used as a shooter unit, they can be used as a melee unit, but let's go through some of the advantages of some of these Hive Fleets. The first one is the Behemoth Hive Fleet, which is a +1 to the strength on the charge or heroically intervening. That puts those bone swords again onto strength 8, so you won't need to spend points on the adrenal glands to get them to strength 8, or if you did, they would in fact be strength 9. There's also a re-rollable charge roll army-wide with the adaptive part of this Hive Fleet. The Kraken Hive Fleet is also a very good option here, getting the extra AP on the charge. That one's really good, especially as Armour of Contempt has been removed. Now to be honest with you, the adaptive part of this I would swap out and I would look into one of the Hunt biomorphologies, which is Augmented Ferocity. This is going to add 1 to the charge rolls for units with this adaptation. The Leviathan Hive Fleet has an interesting synergy with the Tyranid warriors, some good parts, some bad parts. So they're not going to gain the transhuman physiology part, which is the can't wound them on less than a 4+, because they are not a Synapse monster. And also from the second bullet point, it excludes Synapse units, so they're not going to gain any of the abilities from the main part, which is the Synaptic Control part of the Hive Fleet. The adaptive allows them to re-roll a hit roll whether they're shooting or fighting, but why the Leviathan Hive Fleet could be good for the Tyranid warriors is for the psychic power, which is Hive Nexus. So with the Hive Nexus, you select a friendly Leviathan core unit within Synaptic Link range of a Psyker. Ideally this would be Zone Throats, because you're going to need them in a moment and I'll explain why. So you're going to be selecting a Synaptic Imperative ability of a friendly Leviathan Synapse model that is also within Synaptic Link range of the Psyker, and then until the next turn the unit benefits from the Synapse model's Synaptic Imperative ability as well as the active one available at that battle round. So if you do have Zone Throats on the battlefield as well as your Warlord, of course, their Synaptic Imperative ability is Warp Shielding, so all units within 6 inches of Synapse models are going to gain an Invuln save. If they're a monster they gain a 4+, and if they're not a monster they're going to gain a 5+. So if you were to pull this psychic power off every single battle round, then you can effectively give your Tyranid warriors a 5+ invulnerable save for every single turn in fact, providing that you pass the psychic test and the Zone Throats are still on the battlefield. Now this isn't going to be that useful with smaller units of course, but again if you've got a 9-man unit, even a 6-man unit, having an invuln save with toughness 5, that could be pretty good. Other Hive Fleets that we're going to talk about is the Gorgon Hive Fleet. Not really so much for the Hive Fleet adaptation, wounding on a 4+ always being successful, we don't really need that to be honest with you, and a single reroll to their shooting attacks or fighting attacks, yeah that's not too bad, but mainly it's about their stratagem as well as their psychic power. So the stratagem is hypertoxicity. We've already mentioned it earlier in the video. If you're taking the toxin sacks on your Tyranid warriors, so as we already said earlier in this video, if you've got a large unit of these, 1/3 of your attacks dice are going to literally wound because of this stratagem as well as the toxin sacks. And as for the psychic power, which is poisonous influence, you select a friendly Gorgon unit within Synaptic Link range of a Psyker, then until the next psychic phase, each time a model in that unit makes an attack, unmodified wound rolls of a 6 inflict a mortal wound to a maximum of 6 mortal wounds. Again, if you've got a lot of models here, that could be fantastic. Now, I wouldn't advise using both of these at the same time, because the stratagem hypertoxicity gives you less wound rolls to actually make because they automatically wound, so you're not going to be rolling as many 6s to wound to inflict those mortal wounds, so I wouldn't use them at the same time, but either or is very good. The Yongmunder Hive Fleet, this one works because they are likely going to be staying in your backfield or maybe at the halfway line of the battlefield at most, and if they're being fired upon more than 12 inches away then they're going to be treated as having dense cover, so a -1 to hit them, which could be quite handy. Now I would again remove the adaptive part of this Hive Fleet and take one of the lurk biomorphologies. The one I like the look of is the naturalized camouflage. While they're receiving the benefits of cover from a terrain feature, add 1 to the armor saving throw. So if you've got them in light cover, that's going to be light cover as well as the dense cover because of the Yongmunder Hive Fleet abilities, and also a +1 to the armor saving throw as well. If the weapon has no AP, it will give them a 2+ armor save as well as a -1 to hit them. The Kronos Hive Fleet, if you're taking shooty Tyranid warriors, get an additional 4-inch range to your weapons. Yep, not too bad. Some of the weapons are quite mid-range to short range. You're also getting a little bit extra AP at half range, which is pretty good, but you could remove that. Again, I'd look at the ecoskeletal stabilization, which is one of the feed biomorphologies, to be able to advance and fire those assault weapons. Right, so I've summed up some of the options within the Hive Fleets. Let's look at some stratagems before we get into the pros and cons and the Planet 40k rating for Tyranid warriors. The first is Reinforced Hive Node. It's 1 command point or 2 command points, depending on the unit size, used on Tyranid warriors or a Tyranid prime when they're selected as a target of an attack. Effectively, it's a -1 to the damage, which gives them a lot of resiliency. If you're being fired upon with D3 damage weapons, the average of that is 2, goes back to 1. Yeah, not too bad, and you can pull that out your sleeve as and when you need it. And the other one is Shard Law for 1 command point. In the shooting phase, when a range attack is made by a Synapse unit and you score a hit against an enemy unit, then until the end of the turn, each time a friendly Hive Fleet unit declares a charge against that particular targeted unit, they're going to add an additional d6 when making a charge roll and discard one of the dice for that charge roll. So you could fire using your Tyranid warriors and then make a charge move with another unit within your army. Maybe it's a Screamer Killer, for example. They've now got a much easier charge because of these Tyranid warriors. Right, so let's get on to the pros and cons for the Tyranid warriors. First of all, they are Synapse. They're also going to count for the Synaptic Insight secondary objective if you're taking that. And of course, they're assisting with the Synaptic Links. They've got multiple weapon options which you can customize how you see fit. They can shoot as well as fight. Again, going back to those custom options there. They are core. They are troops, so they've got objectives secured. They are infantry, so they can do raise the banners, RBD. Anything that relates to infantry with the secondaries, they can do it. You could take groups of up to 9 of them. Yes, it's expensive, but that could be absolutely brutal. And they work in pretty much any Hive Fleet. As for the cons, they're quite expensive once you're kitting them out. Dual bone swords, I think 10 points is way too expensive. I wouldn't go near them at the moment. And if you compare them to, say, the Space Marine Codex again, the Terminators are around, what, 30 to 40 points? They've got the 2+ armor with a 5+ invulnerable save. They hit much harder. Whereas these guys, once you add the weapons on, they're actually more expensive. You've got a 4+ armor save, which I think is quite low. And there's no standard invulnerable save. And finally, you're going to need a lot of magnets. Every edition, these weapons tend to change in terms of their stats and what they can do, so I would highly advise magnetizing if you are starting with your Tyranid warriors. So for the Planet 40k rating today for the Tyranid warriors, I'm going to go with a Planet 40k rating of 4.5 stars. So that's it from me today, guys. Remember to like and subscribe on your exits. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.